stood in the waiting chamber, adjusting his formal diplomatic coat for the third time. Through the transparent walls, he could see the massive assembly hall where representatives from 847 different species gathered. Some floated in special atmosphere bubbles. Others stood on platforms adjusted to their gravity needs. A few existed only as energy projections. The sight should have filled him with wonder, but today it only made his stomach tight with worry. "Stop fidgeting," Sangwoo said beside him. The military advisor's uniform was perfectly pressed, his face calm but his eyes sharp. "You look like a nervous academy student." "I feel like one," admitted. He glanced at Jin, their science officer, who was reading through data on her tablet with intense focus. "What are the numbers looking like?" Jin didn't look up. "Bad. They have convinced at least 600 species to support the directive. The Empire brought another 100 into their camp. We have maybe 3 dozen who might abstain, but nobody will vote with us." 3 dozen out of 800, whispered. The young translator had been quiet all morning. Her job was to listen and interpret the subtle meanings behind alien words, but today there was nothing subtle about what was happening. "They decided this before we even arrived, didn't they?" Wanted to lie to her to offer hope, but he respected her too much for that. "Yes, this is just theater now. They want to make it look official." The doors opened with a deep chime. A floating drone approached them, its mechanical voice announcing their entrance. Straightened his coat one last time and walked into the chamber. The scale of the place always struck him. The ceiling stretched so high it created its own weather system. Clouds actually formed near the top. The representatives sat in curved rows that rose like a coliseum, thousands of eyes and sensors turning to watch the human delegation enter. Some of those eyes showed curiosity. Many showed contempt. They took their assigned seats in the lower section. It was not lost on that humanity's position had been moved further from the center stage over the past year. Chancellor of the Confederacy stood to speak. His species looked like tall, thin birds covered in metallic feathers that shifted colors. When he spoke, his voice boomed through the translation system. "We gather today to address a matter of galactic security," began. "The species known as humans have been members of our coalition for only 42 standard years. In that time, they have established 12 colony worlds and refused to stop their expansion." Clenched his fists under the desk. 12 colonies. They had 12,000. "They build military vessels at an alarming rate," continued. "They develop weapons technology without proper oversight. They have refused to share their faster-than-light drive designs with the scientific community. Most troubling, they defend primitive species from rightful resource extraction, claiming moral grounds." The chamber filled with various sounds of agreement. Chirps, buzzes, and translated voices all mixing together. The Empress spoke next. Her kind looked like large cats made of living crystal. "The human historical records show a species drenched in violence, wars, genocides, destructive weapons. They nearly destroyed their own planet before reaching space. Do we truly want such a species spreading unchecked through our galaxy?" Jin leaned toward. "The wiped out 6 species during their expansion phase. They have no right to judge us." "They have every right," Sangwoo muttered. "They won their wars, they get to write the rules." Wanted to argue, but he knew Sangwoo was correct. The Galactic Coalition was not built on justice. It was built on power, and humanity was still new, still weak in the eyes of these ancient empires. For 3 hours, species after species stood to speak against humanity. They brought up evidence of human aggression. They showed images of human warships, making them look menacing with careful editing. They quoted human military communications out of context. They painted a picture of a dangerous, unpredictable species that needed to be controlled. Requested to speak 7 times. 7 times the request was. Finally, the vote was called. The Frontier Quarantine Directive would limit humanity to their current 12 worlds. No new colonies. No exploration beyond designated zones. All colony ships currently in transit would be recalled. Humanity would have 30 standard days to comply or face corrective sanctions. The voting display appeared above the chamber. Species indicators lit up across the board: green for yes, red for no, yellow for abstain. The chamber glowed green like a sick sunrise. 731 votes for the directive, 3 abstentions, 0 against. Made a small sound beside him, something between a gasp and a sob. Jin's face had gone completely blank. Sangwoo simply stared at the display with the expression of a man doing calculations in his head. Chancellor stood again. The directive passes with overwhelming support. The human delegation will receive formal documentation within the hour. This chamber recognizes the wisdom of limiting expansion from potentially dangerous species. History will thank us for our caution. Applause rippled through the chamber. Not from everyone noted. Some species sat in silence. A few looked uncomfortable, but most seemed pleased with themselves, as if they had accomplished something important. Ambassador said, looking down at him from the raised platform, "Do you accept the terms of this directive on behalf of humanity?" Every eye in the chamber turned to him, stood slowly. His hands were steady now. The nervousness had burned away, replaced by something cold and clear. "I request permission to speak," he said calmly. "The matter is settled. Speaking time has passed. Then I request permission to make a formal statement of record." Feathers rippled with what might have been amusement. "Very well. The chamber recognizes Ambassador of Earth. Your statement will be recorded." Looked around the massive chamber. He thought about the speech he had prepared, full of careful diplomatic language and appeals to reason. He had spent weeks writing it. He deleted the entire thing from his mind in an instant. "Humanity rejects this directive," he said simply. The chamber went silent. "You cannot reject," started. "We reject it," repeated louder now. "We came to this coalition in good faith. We followed your rules. We shared our culture, our art, our science. We asked only to be treated as equals. Instead, you treat us as children who need to be controlled, or worse, as animals that need to be caged." "This is highly irregular," the Empress said. "You're right," agreed. He turned to his delegation. "We're leaving." Sangwoo stood immediately. Then Jin. Then, one by one, all 47 human delegates rose from their seats. "You cannot simply walk out of a binding directive," said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "Watch us," said. He started walking toward the exit. His delegation followed. The chamber erupted in chaos behind them, hundreds of species shouting and calling for order, but didn't look back. His hands were steady, his mind was clear, and for the first time since arriving at this station, he felt like he could breathe. Caught up to him as they exited. "What happens now?" she asked. Looked at her and saw his own anger reflected in her young eyes. "Now," he said quietly, "now they learn what humanity is really capable of." The doors closed behind them with a final, decisive sound. The human delegation chambers felt too small now. 47 people crowded into a space designed for formal meetings, not war councils. That's what this had become, realized. A war council. "We need to hit them hard," Sangwoo said, packing like a caged animal. "Show them we're not some weak species they can push around. Our fleet can be mobilized in 48 hours. "And then what?" Jin asked. She sat at the main console, fingers moving rapidly across holographic displays. "We have 300 warships. The Confederacy alone has 30,000. The Empire has even more. We fight them directly, we die. Simple math." "So we just accept their terms," a younger diplomat named shouted. "Let them cage us like pets." "Nobody said that," replied calmly. He stood at the window, looking out at the station's central hub. Ships from hundreds of species docked and departed in an endless dance. "But Sangwoo and Jin are both right. We can't beat them in direct combat, and we won't accept their directive." "Then what's the plan?" asked. Turned from the window. "We show them the cost of making an enemy of humanity." Jin stopped typing. "I might have something that helps with that." She pulled up a new display, and everyone gathered around. "I've been digging through the Coalition's historical archives, public records mostly, things they thought nobody would bother to read." "And," Sangwoo prompted. "And I found evidence that the N have been planning this for months, but not because they're actually afraid of our expansion." She switched displays, showing communication intercepts and meeting records. 3 months ago, human explorers found ruins on an uncharted world, ancient structures from a species that went extinct 2,000 years ago. "I remember that," said. "The civilization. We reported it to the Archaeological Council." "Right, but what we didn't know is that those ruins contained evidence. Records showing that and worked together to destroy they saw them as competition and wiped them out." The room went silent. "That's genocide," whispered. "That's exactly what it is," Jin confirmed. "And there's more. Over the past 1,000 years, at least 12 species have mysteriously gone extinct right after making contact with the Coalition. I found fragments of data suggesting and were involved in most of them." Sangwoo leaned forward. "So they're pushing this directive against us because we found their secret." "That's my theory," Jin said. "They want us contained before we can dig deeper. Maybe they're planning to make us species number 13. Felt his blood run cold, then hot, then cold again. "Send this to me, all of it. We're going back to that chamber." "The assembly won't reconvene until tomorrow," said. "Then we make them reconvene tonight." 2 hours later, stood once again before the Galactic Assembly. This time, he had demanded an emergency session. The chamber was less crowded than before, only about 500 species present, but that was enough. Chancellor looked annoyed. "Ambassador, your dramatic exit earlier was noted. If you've returned to accept the directive's terms, a simple communication would have sufficed." "I'm not here to accept anything," said. He activated a holographic display visible to the entire chamber. "I'm here to show the assembly who they're really protecting." The evidence flashed across hundreds of screens. Ancient records, communication intercepts, archaeological data, financial transactions. It all painted a clear picture of systematic genocide spanning 1,000 years. "This is outrageous," the Empress roared. "These files are fabricated." "They're from your own archives," Jin called out. "Public records that nobody bothered to correlate until now." "Even if authentic," said, his feathers darkening, "ancient history has no bearing on current security matters. The Frontier Quarantine Directive stands." "Ancient history," felt his control slipping. "You murdered billions of beings and call it ancient history." "We brought order to chaos," said coldly. "We made difficult decisions so the galaxy could prosper, something humans are too young and naive to understand." Other species began murmuring. Some looked disturbed by the evidence. Others seemed indifferent. A few actually nodded in agreement with. "The directive stands," the Empress repeated. "Humanity will comply or face the consequences." Looked around the chamber. He saw fear in some faces, apathy in others, malice in more than a few. These species didn't care about justice. They cared about maintaining their power structure, even if it was built on graves. "Then let me make humanity's position clear," said. His voice echoed through the chamber. "We came to you in peace. We believed in the ideals this coalition claimed to represent: justice, cooperation, the advancement of all species." He paused, letting the silence build. "You have shown us that those ideals are lies. This coalition doesn't value justice. It values control. It doesn't protect the weak. It crushes them. And it doesn't want cooperation. It wants submission." "Careful, Ambassador," warned. "Or what? You'll quarantine us. You already did that." Turned to Sangwoo and nodded. The military advisor tapped a command on his wrist device. As of this moment, Sang-woo announced, his voice carrying through every speaker in the chamber, humanity formally withdraws from the Galactic Coalition. All treaties are void. All agreements are canceled. All human vessels in Coalition space will depart within 24 hours. The chamber exploded in noise. Species shouting, translators struggling to keep up, alarms beginning to sound. "You can't do this," shouted over the chaos. "We already have," replied. He signaled to his delegation. All 47 of them stood in perfect synchronization. "This is political suicide," the Empress hissed. "You'll be isolated, alone. You'll have no allies, no trade, no protection." Walked toward the exit, his delegation following. At the door, he turned back one last time. "We'd rather be alone with honor than together with genocidal cowards. You wanted to teach us about galactic order. Congratulations. Lesson learned." Was the last human in the chamber. She looked up at the thousands of aliens staring down at them. Young, brave, and absolutely certain of her next words. "You'll regret this," she said simply. "You'll regret teaching us that we stand alone, because now you'll learn what humanity does when it has no reason to hold back." Then she turned and walked out, letting the door seal behind her. In the chamber, chaos continued. Some species demanded immediate military action. Others called for negotiations. A few, the ones, sat in silence with expressions of deep concern. Chancellor stood at the central podium, his feathers rippling with rage. "Seal the borders. Begin economic sanctions. Prepare the fleets." "Is that wise?" a voice asked. One of the older species, the collective's representative Jinho, stood slowly. "We know very little about human military capabilities. They've been remarkably secretive about their defense infrastructure." "They're a young species with 300 ships," snapped. "We'll crush them in a week if they resist." Jinho said nothing, but his expression suggested he wasn't convinced. He had watched the humans carefully during their time in the Coalition. They learned fast, they adapted faster, and they never showed all their cards. "Begin the sanctions," the Empress commanded. "Show them the cost of defiance." The assembly voted quickly this time. No long speeches, no formal procedures. Within an hour, humanity was officially an enemy of the Galactic Coalition. In the human delegation chambers now being packed up, Sang-woo looked at. "You know what comes next." "War," said quietly. "War," Sang-woo confirmed. "Are we ready?" Thought about Earth, about the colonies, about the billions of humans who just had their futures changed forever, about the secrets they had kept from the Coalition. "They're about to find out," he said. The galaxy held its breath for 48 hours. Then humanity disappeared. Every human colony went dark. Communication channels shut down. Trade networks collapsed. Ships that had been carrying human goods to hundreds of worlds simply turned around and went home. Embassies emptied overnight. Human citizens living on alien worlds packed up and left, politely declining to explain why. On the collectives, Jinho sat in his intelligence office, watching reports flood in from across the galaxy. As a neutral species, they tried to maintain good relations with everyone. That meant paying attention to everything. "It's like they vanished," his aide said. "Every human-controlled system has gone silent." "Not vanished," Jinho corrected. "They're still there, they're just not talking to anyone. They are claiming this proves human instability." Jinho made a thoughtful sound. He had watched humanity for years. They weren't unstable, they were calculating. "What about the trade disruption reports?" "Severe. Over 200 species relied on human trade routes. Their shipping networks were more extensive than we realized." The aide pulled up economic data. "Without human intermediaries, the cost of shipping across the southern spiral has tripled." "Interesting." Jinho leaned back in his chair. "So humanity wasn't just participating in galactic trade, they were holding it together." A priority alert flashed on his screen. Jinho opened it and felt his blood chill. "What is it?" his aide asked. "The Empire just sent a peacekeeping fleet to the human mining colony on Arcturus 7. 300 warships. They're claiming they need to secure vital resources now that humanity has withdrawn from the coalition." "That's an act of war." "Technically, humanity isn't part of the coalition anymore, so there's no war to declare." Jinho watched the fleet's progress on the tactical display. "They'll reach Arcturus 7 in 6 hours. He expected the humans to run, to evacuate, to plead for mercy. Instead, 6 hours later, the fleet simply disappeared. Not destroyed, not scattered, just gone. 300 warships and 40,000 crew members stopped transmitting, stopped moving, stopped existing on any sensor net in the galaxy." "How?" his aide whispered, staring at the empty tactical display. Jinho was already pulling up every sensor log he could access. Then he found it. A single transmission, broadcast on all channels from the edge of human space. The voice was calm, professional, and absolutely terrifying. "This is Admiral Min of the Earth Defense Fleet. The Empire has violated human territory. Their fleet has been disabled and their crews will be returned unharmed. Consider this a demonstration of restraint." A pause. "Let me be clear. Humanity sought peace. You gave us war. We did not want this, but we will end it." The transmission cut off. "Disabled," the aide said. 300 warships disabled. How is that even possible?" Jinho thought about the past 40 years of human integration into the coalition. Thought about how secretive they'd been about their military capabilities. Thought about their rapid technological advancement. Thought about how everyone had assumed humanity was weak because they were new. "We made a terrible mistake," he said quietly. Across the galaxy, the same realization was spreading. Species that had voted for the Frontier Quarantine Directive were suddenly asking questions. How advanced was human military technology? What had they been building while pretending to be cooperative? How many ships did they really have? Nobody knew. That was the terrifying part. Chancellor called an emergency council meeting. His advisors gathered in the war room, and none of them looked confident. "Explain to me," said slowly, "how 300 warships simply disappeared." "We don't know," his military commander admitted. "We've never seen this kind of technology. They didn't even fire weapons. The ships just stopped responding. Some kind of electronic warfare. Beyond anything in our databases. Our best analysts think they hit the entire fleet simultaneously with some kind of AI virus or quantum disruption field. But those are just guesses." Feathers darkened. "Where is this Admiral Min's fleet? How many ships?" "We don't know that either. Our sensors can't penetrate human space. They've set up some kind of interference field along their entire border. So we're blind." "Effectively, yes." Stood and walked to the display showing the galaxy map. The human territory looked small. 12 colonies scattered across a minor section of the spiral arm, but now those 12 systems were surrounded by darkness. Unknown, threatening. "Mobilize the full Confederacy fleet," ordered. "All 30,000 ships. If they couldn't handle them, we'll show them real military power." His advisors exchanged worried glances but said nothing. Orders went out. The fleet began to assemble. Meanwhile, on a human colony world called New Sol, Jin worked in an underground facility that officially didn't exist. Around her, hundreds of scientists monitored displays showing information the Coalition had never suspected humanity possessed. "They are mobilizing," one of her assistants reported. 30,000 ships heading toward our border." "Expected," Jin said calmly. She typed commands into her console. "Begin Phase 2 of Operation Exodus. Start evacuating civilians from border colonies. How long until they reach our space?" 4 days at their current speed." "Good, that gives us time." She opened a communication channel. "Admiral Min, you're seeing this." "I am," Min's voice came through, calm despite commanding the defense of an entire species. "My fleet is in position. Are you certain about this approach?" 97% certain, Jin replied. "Their ships use network navigation systems, very efficient for coordinating large fleets, also very vulnerable if you know what you're doing." "And you know what you're doing." "Admiral, I helped design the quantum communication protocols they're using. They bought the technology from us 15 years ago. They never asked if we kept a." She heard Min laugh. "Devious, I like it standing by." On the fourth day, the fleet crossed into human space. 30,000 warships, enough firepower to crack planets. They expected resistance. They expected a fight. What they got was silence. Until Admiral Min's voice broadcast directly into their command ships. "Fleet, you are trespassing, turn back now." Chancellor himself was aboard the flagship. "Or what, human? You'll disable us like you did the try it. We've upgraded our systems. We're ready for your tricks." "Very well," Min said. "I did warn you." The fleet continued forward. Then every ship simultaneously lost navigation control. Not power, not weapons, just navigation. 30,000 warships, all programmed to fly in perfect formation, suddenly lost all coordination. Ships collided. Evasive systems activated but without central control. The fleet scattered in all directions. Some ships fired on each other by mistake. Others crashed into nearby asteroids. The entire formation dissolved into chaos in less than 5 minutes. Not a single shot had been fired by human forces. "What's happening?" shouted at his bridge crew. "Our navigation systems are being. I can't control the ship." "Switch to manual control." "We're trying, the system won't release." Then every screen on every ship showed the same face. Jin, looking tired but satisfied. "Hello, Chancellor. This is Science Officer Jin of Earth. Your ships are unharmed, but they're now under our control. We're sending them back to your space. Slowly. You'll have plenty of time to think about your choices." "You can't do this," screamed. "This is an act of war." "No," Jin corrected. "You committed the act of war when you invaded our space. This is just us defending ourselves. The difference is, we're not killing you. We could have destroyed your entire fleet in seconds. Instead, we're sending you home with a lesson." The transmission ended. 30,000 warships began flying backward, out of human space, at an excruciatingly slow speed. It would take them 2 weeks to get home. 2 weeks of humiliation. 2 weeks of realizing that humanity had been holding back this entire time. Back on Station Nexus Prime, Jinho read the reports with growing horror. Not horror at what humanity had done. Horror at what the Coalition had created. "They were never weak," he said to his aide. "They were patient. They played by our rules, shared just enough technology to seem friendly, and all the while they were developing things we couldn't even imagine." "What do we do?" "We stay neutral," Jinho said firmly, "and we hope humanity remembers who their friends were." His aide brought up new data. "Sir, 47 species have secretly contacted humanity requesting trade agreements. They're not willing to give up human technology." 47. Jinho felt a grim satisfaction. The Coalition is fracturing already. On Earth, in the Global Defense Headquarters, received the same reports. Sangwoo stood beside him, reviewing military readiness reports. "They're scared now," Sangwoo said. "Good." "Scared people do desperate things," warned. "This isn't over." As if responding to his words, an alert flashed. New intelligence from deep space. Jinho had sent it, marked urgent. Read it and felt his stomach drop. Oh no. "What is it?" "The Horde. They've been watching the Coalition for years, waiting for weakness." Looked up at Sangwoo. "They just invaded the outer systems. 50 worlds have already fallen." "The Coalition's problem," Sangwoo said coldly. Is it? Asked. Those are billions of lives, Sang-woo, innocent people. Sang-woo's expression hardened. They voted to cage us, they tried to destroy us, now they want our help. They haven't asked yet, said, but they will. He was right. 3 days later the request came. The message arrived through standard diplomatic channels, marked as priority urgent. Jinho himself delivered it, traveling to Earth on a neutral vessel, requesting permission to land. Met him at the spaceport in Seoul. The diplomat looked older than he remembered, tired, maybe scared. Ambassador Jinho greeted formally. This is unexpected. I come not as coalition representative, Jinho said immediately. I come as someone who believes humanity was treated unjustly. I need you to hear me. They walked to a quiet meeting room. Through the windows, the city stretched out below them. Humanity had rebuilt Earth beautifully after their near-destruction centuries ago. Jinho had always admired that resilience. The Horde is destroying everything, Jinho said without preamble. 200 worlds have fallen in 60 days. The coalition fleet can't stop them. They're too disorganized, too used to relying on technology over tactics. They are simple, brutal, and overwhelming. I'm aware, said carefully. We've been monitoring the situation. Then you know millions are dying. Jinho leaned forward. I'm not here on behalf of Chancellor or the Empress. I'm here because innocent people are suffering and humanity has the power to stop it. We have the power, agreed. That doesn't mean we have the obligation. The coalition made their choice. They wanted us contained, isolated, controlled. Now they face the consequences. You're right, Jinho said, surprising him. The coalition failed you. We failed you. I voted to abstain on that directive, but I didn't vote against it. I was a coward. I prioritized my own species' safety over what was right. The honesty was unexpected, found himself reassessing the diplomat. But, Jinho continued, the people dying now aren't the ones who voted against you. Most are from species that had no power in the coalition. They're farmers, artists, families, children. They didn't choose this war. Walked to the window. In the distance, he could see ships launching from Earth's orbital docks. Humanity's secret fleet, built in hidden shipyards over decades. 3,000 vessels, not 300. Advanced AI systems. Quantum weapons. Technology the coalition couldn't match because they'd grown complacent. What exactly is the coalition asking for? He asked. Nothing officially, Jinho admitted. Refuses to request help from humans. The Empress is the same. Pride blinds them. But 12 species have formally broken from the coalition and formed a new alliance. They're calling it the Free Worlds Compact. They're asking for your help. 12 species turned back, and what are they offering in return? Jinho handed him a data chip. Read it. It's everything you asked for. Equal representation, formal apology for the directive, prosecution of war criminals, a new government structure without the old power imbalances. Inserted the chip and read quickly. It was comprehensive, real change, everything they'd wanted. What about the coalition loyalists? And the Empress won't accept this. Then they'll be outvoted, Jinho said. Species are leaving the coalition daily now. Some because they see the moral truth, others because they're afraid of humanity. Fear can be useful. I need to discuss this with my advisors. Of course, but please hurry. Every day more people die. Called an emergency council. Sang-woo, Jin, and 20 other key leaders gathered in the war room beneath the Capitol building. No, Sang-woo said immediately after hearing the proposal. We don't owe them anything. Let the coalition burn. Billions of innocent people will die, countered. She'd grown harder in the past months but hadn't lost her compassion. We can't just watch that happen. They watched us get quarantined, Sang-woo shot back. They watched try to cage us. Where was their compassion then? He's not wrong, said Woo, the economic minister. Though I should point out that 12 species representing 40% of the coalition's economy have broken away. If we help them, we gain powerful allies. So we make this about profit, Sang-woo asked coldly. I'm making it about survival, Wu replied. If they conquer the coalition, they'll come for us next. Better to fight them now with allies. Jin had been quiet, studying data. They are using swarm tactics, overwhelming numbers, simple technology, but effective. The coalition can't adapt because their military doctrine hasn't changed in 1,000 years. They're too rigid. And we're not, Sang-woo asked. We're humans, Jin said with a slight smile. We're practically made of adaptation. Give me 3 weeks with their fleet coordination and I can make them effective again. Let them argue. He valued all their perspectives. Finally, he raised his hand for silence. Here's what we're going to do, he said. We'll help, but on our terms. The Galactic Coalition as it exists will be dissolved. A new governing body will be established with equal representation for all species. The Frontier Quarantine Directive will be formally declared a crime, and the Empress will face justice for their past actions. They'll never agree, Sang-woo said. They will when the alternative is extinction, replied. And if they don't, we'll help the Free Worlds Compact and let the coalition fall. Cold murmured. Necessary, corrected. We're not vengeful, but we won't be taken advantage of again. The terms were delivered to Jin-ho, who transmitted them to the Free Worlds Compact. The response came within hours. Accepted. All terms. The coalition loyalists held out for another week. Then they destroyed 3 of their core worlds in a single day. 50 billion dead. The coalition collapsed in panic. And the Empress sent a joint message. They accepted the terms. They would dissolve the coalition. They would face justice. Anything to save their species. Pride, Sang-woo noted, is expensive. Admiral Min led the human fleet to the front lines. 3,000 ships joined the 2,000 vessels of the Free Worlds Compact. It was still outnumbered by the swarms, but Min wasn't worried. They fight with numbers, he explained to the Allied commanders. We'll fight with intelligence. Jin had developed new tactics specifically for this enemy. She'd studied them for weeks, learning their patterns. They were aggressive, predictable, and overconfident, perfect targets for human strategy. The first major battle happened near the system. 10,000 ships versus 5,000 Allied vessels. They charged forward in their typical swarm pattern. Then the human fleet activated the new technology Jin had developed. Not weapons, communication jammers. They relied on quantum entanglement for coordination. Disrupt that, and the swarm became chaos. 10,000 ships suddenly lost all coordination. They crashed into each other, fired randomly, scattered without direction. The Allied fleet picked them off systematically. Human ships didn't fight like other species. They used unpredictable movements, feints, psychological warfare. Sang-woo had trained the crews personally. Every captain was encouraged to think independently, adapt on the fly, try new approaches. They had never faced anything like it. In 4 months, humanity and their allies pushed them back to their own territory. Not through overwhelming force, but through superior tactics, better technology, and relentless innovation. The galaxy watched in shock. The species everyone had tried to quarantine had saved them. On Station Nexus Prime, now under new management, the first meeting of the Conquered of Free Worlds convened. 847 species, but this time, every voice was equal. Chancellor stood before the assembly wearing restraints, the Empress beside him. They would face trial for their crimes, but first they had to witness the new order they'd tried to prevent. The Conquered of Free Worlds, announced the speaker, recognizes Ambassador of Earth as our first speaker, not as ruler but as arbiter and representative. Walk to the center stage, the same spot where had stood when declaring the Frontier Quarantine Directive. The symmetry wasn't lost on anyone. "We stand here," began, "not as conquerors but as survivors, all of us. The old coalition was built on power and fear. This conquered will be built on cooperation and respect." He looked directly at, "What happened to humanity was wrong. What you did to thee and other species was genocidal. Justice demands accountability, but justice also demands we build something better." Stood beside him, translating for species whose languages the system couldn't process. She looked proud. They all did. "The Frontier Quarantine Directive is hereby declared a crime against sentience," continued. "All species have the right to explore, expand, and flourish. We will protect that right together." The assembly erupted in approval. Not everyone. Some species still resented humanity's rise, but most recognized the truth. The galaxy had changed. Power alone wasn't enough anymore. Later, Sangwoo found looking out at the stars from an observation deck. "You did it," the admiral said. "Everything you wanted." "We did it," corrected, "all of us, and it's not done, and the Empress will stand trial. They are still out there. Dozens of species are still recovering. We have years of work ahead." "But we're not alone anymore," Sangwoo noted. "We have allies now, real ones." Smiled, "We were never alone. They just tried to make us think we were. That was their biggest mistake." The trial of Chancellor and Empress lasted 3 months. Every species in the Concord was allowed to present evidence. Every victim species, living or extinct, had their story told. Presided as first speaker, but he wasn't the judge. That role fell to a council of 12 species, chosen at random to ensure fairness. Humanity wasn't among them, had insisted on that. This trial couldn't look like revenge. The evidence was overwhelming. Records of 12 extinct species, communication logs showing planned genocides, financial data tracking resource theft, testimony from survivors who'd lost entire worlds. Stood in the defendant's chamber, his metallic feathers dull with stress. "We did what was necessary," he said when given a chance to speak. "The galaxy needed order. Someone had to make the hard choices." Hard choices. Serving as prosecutor, stepped forward. She'd become fierce during the trial. "You murdered 60 billion sentient beings across 12 species. That's not a hard choice. That's evil." "You're young," replied. "You don't understand how the galaxy works." "Then explain it to me," challenged. "Explain how killing an entire species of artists brought order. Explain how destroying a peaceful species of explorers created stability. Go ahead, I'm listening." Had no answer, neither did the Empress. The council deliberated for 1 week. Then they returned with the verdict: guilty on all counts. Genocide, war crimes, conspiracy, abuse of power. The sentence was exile. Both leaders would be sent to a remote world with basic supplies. They would live out their days remembering what they'd done, unable to harm anyone else. Not death. Humanity had argued against execution. They wanted to be better than the monsters they were judging. "Mercy," said bitterly as he was led away. "Is that what you call this?" "No," replied. "We call it justice tempered with restraint, something you never understood." With the trial complete, the real work began. Rebuilding, reforming, reimagining what a galactic civilization could be. Jin took charge of technological sharing initiatives. For decades, powerful species had hoarded advanced technology. Now she opened Earth's libraries to everyone: fusion power, medical advances, agricultural improvements, everything humanity had developed. "Won't this make us less special?" one of her assistants asked. "Technology isn't power," Jin explained. "Knowledge is power, and knowledge grows when it's shared. Besides, we'll always be innovating. That's what humans do." She was right. Within 6 months, dozens of species had adapted human technology in ways humans hadn't imagined. A species called the used human medical tech to cure a disease that had plagued them for centuries. The combined human AI with their own quantum computing to create art that made people weep. Jinho visited Earth again. this time as ambassador of the collective and a member of the conquered Security Council. He found in a garden outside the government building, enjoying rare time off. "You look tired," Jinho observed. "I am tired," admitted. "Running a galactic government is harder than opposing one. At least when we were the rebels, we knew who the enemy was." "Any regrets?" "Considered that. Sometimes, I wonder if we could have found a peaceful solution, if I'd been more patient, more diplomatic." "They gave you no choice," Jinho said firmly. "I was there. I watched them dismiss you, mock you, try to cage you. You did what you had to do." "Maybe," plucked a flower from the garden. "But so many died, during the invasion, during the restructuring. I carry those deaths." "Leaders always do," Jinho said. "It's the price of power, but look what you've built. 847 species working together. Real cooperation, not forced compliance. That's worth the cost." Deep in space, Admiral Min commanded the conquered defense fleet from his flagship. The fleet was diverse now. Human ships alongside vessels, craft that had defected to the new order, even some former warships. "Patrol route complete," his navigation officer reported. "No activity detected." "Good," Min said, "but stay alert. They'll try again eventually." His tactical officer, a named, chittered in agreement. 6 months ago they'd been strangers from different species. Now they were comrades, friends even. Admiral said, "I've been meaning to ask. When your species walked out of that assembly, were you scared?" "Terrified," Min admitted. "We were risking everything. Our colonies, our people, our future. But sometimes the risk of doing nothing is worse than the risk of standing up." "My people were among those who voted for the quarantine," said quietly. "We were afraid. We didn't know humans. We listened to lies. I'm sorry." "You're here now," Min replied. "That's what matters. The past is for learning, the future is for building." On New Seoul, Sangwoo had retired from active military duty to run the conquered military academy. Students from hundreds of species came to learn human tactics, strategies, and philosophy. "War," he told a classroom of young officers, "is not about strength. It's about will. It's about adaptation. It's about knowing when to fight and when to show mercy." A young student raised a claw. "But sir, your species was threatened with extinction. How did you show mercy?" "We didn't kill our enemies when we could have," Sangwoo explained. "We disabled their fleets, not destroyed them. We demanded justice, not revenge. That's the difference between warriors and murderers." Another student, this one human, asked, "Do you think we'll face another threat like the—" "Definitely," Sangwoo said. "The galaxy is dangerous, but now we face it together. That makes all the difference." In the new conquered assembly hall, deliberately built to look different from the old coalition chambers, worked as the official historian. Her job was to document everything, the good and the bad, the triumphs and the failures. She was interviewing former coalition species, getting their perspectives on the change. Today, she spoke with a scientist named who defected early. "Why did you leave the Confederacy?" asked. "Because I saw what was coming," replied. His feathers were bright now, no longer the dull colors of coalition servitude. "When your ambassador walked out, I knew everything would change. The Confederacy was built on fear. Your species showed courage. I wanted to be part of that." "Do you miss the old ways?" "Sometimes," admitted. "Certainty is comfortable. The coalition was predictable. This new conquered is chaotic, messy, argumentative, but it's also alive. The coalition was stagnant. We're growing now." Added his words to the historical record. Future generations would need to understand how this transformation happened, how a single moment of defiance changed everything. 1 year after the walkout, the Conquered held its first anniversary celebration. Every species sent representatives. The station was decorated with art from 100 worlds. Music from 1,000 cultures filled the halls. Stood on a balcony watching the celebration below. Jin joined him, carrying 2 glasses of earth wine. To humanity's stubbornness, she toasted. To adaptation, countered clinking glasses. They drank in comfortable silence. Below, humans danced with. Defectors shared meals with former enemies. Children from dozens of species played together without fear. We did it, Jin said. We actually built something better. We started it, corrected. Every generation will have to keep building, keep improving. The moment we think we're done, we'll start failing again. Pessimist. Realist smiled. But for tonight, let's celebrate. The party continued into the night. Speeches were made, treaties were signed, new friendships formed. It wasn't perfect. There were still tensions, still disagreements, still species that resented the new order, but it was progress. Jinho found near the end of the celebration. I've been thinking, they said. About that day you walked out, I watched you from the gallery. You looked so certain, so confident, but you must have been terrified. I was, admitted. I had no idea if we'd survive, if this would work, if I was leading humanity to destruction. But you did it anyway. Because the alternative was worse. Accepting the quarantine meant accepting that we were less than others, that our dreams mattered less, that our future could be decided by species who didn't respect us. Looked at the crowd below. I'd rather die free than live in a cage. That's what the galaxy didn't understand, Jinho said. They thought they could control you. They didn't realize that humans would burn everything down rather than submit. We didn't burn everything down, corrected gently. We built something new from the ashes of a corrupt system. There's a difference. True, Jinho agreed, and that's why you deserve to win. The celebration wound down. Species returned to their ships, their worlds, their lives, but they left different than they'd arrived, connected, hopeful, part of something larger than themselves. Returned to Earth with his delegation. As their ship entered orbit, he looked down at the blue and green world that had birthed humanity. They'd almost destroyed it once through ignorance and conflict. Now they were using those hard-learned lessons to help build a better galaxy. Final thoughts, Sangwoo asked beside him. Thought about the assembly that had tried to limit them, about the walkout that changed everything, about the war, the trials, the rebuilding, about all the beings who died and all those who now lived in peace. We didn't storm out because we were angry, he said finally. We stormed out because we refused to accept injustice. That's the lesson I want history to remember. Not that humanity was strong, not that we were clever or advanced, but that we refused to accept being treated as less than equal. And now, Sangwoo asked. Now we make sure nobody else has to storm out, replied. We make sure the conquered actually lives up to its ideals. We work every day to be worthy of the trust placed in us. The ship landed. They walked down the ramp to cheering crowds. Heroes they were called, saviors, leaders. But knew the truth. They were just people who'd refused to accept the unacceptable, who'd stood up when standing up was dangerous, who'd believed that justice mattered more than safety. The galaxy had watched in horror when humanity stormed out. Now the galaxy watched in wonder at what they'd built. And the story was just beginning.